Hello, welcome to another episode of Destination Big Leagues. In today's episode, I've got Manson Chen. Manson Chen is the founder of Sovran AI, a SaaS tool that helps creative strategists with their video ads. Formerly, Manson has had roles notably in Calm and Cash App. Thank you so much, Manson, for coming to the podcast. So I guess before we dive into Sovereign, I would kind of like to know, how are your roles at Calm and Cash App, pretty notable companies? Uh, yep,
Yeah, thanks for having me. Would love to chat, share my experiences, talk about some of the exciting topics that we got lined up.
awesome. So I guess let's get into it. So you served growth roles at Calm and Cash App, two pretty interesting companies.
Mhm.
So could you run through kind of your primary functions in those roles in Calm and then Cash App as well?
Sure. When I was at Calm, I was behind the scenes doing creative strategy and media buying. I was, Me and my manager, Nick, we were managing all of Facebook and creative testing. So every week we were testing about 75 different ads a week. Um, I was managing the worldwide campaigns, Spanish, English, Japanese, Korean, Portuguese, all of that. And we were across iOS and Android. And near the end, we were testing our web sign up flow because we wanted to not pay the 30% Apple tax and instead pay the 3% Stripe tax. So that's Calm. I was there for 2 years, and at Cash App, I was leading the creative strategy team. So essentially, feeding our media buyers across all our advertising channels with the top performing creative, letting them know these creatives are doing best, let's do more of that. These creatives are not doing so good, let's do less of that. And working with agencies to procure these creatives. Um, and over there, I was trying to speed up the testing process because before that we were getting uh, hundreds of creatives every quarter, but that's not efficient. Ideally, we're testing every week or twice a week and then iterating off of that. Um, and also creative data analysis. So a lot of data analysis in both roles.
Awesome. That's actually super interesting. I think it's super important to quantify how the success of your creative ads, and there's a whole sort of data science behind all of these things. I know that Calm had a very famous app with LeBron James and Cash App as well. I think one of the notable ads that I've seen with Cash App was Ray Dalio and Kendrick Lamar in a balcony. I'm not sure. Do you remember that ad?
Yeah,
I think
I
that
remember
was
that
one of
one.
the most notable ads. Okay, so did you test those
Yeah.
ads?
Yeah, we tested the LeBron ads and on Facebook, and then the Ray Dalio Kendrick ads. We didn't test them on paid social or Google. We mainly ran those as brand.
Awesome. So I guess the next question I have is, I think why is it so important to test, you know, your creatives?
Great question. So the assumption that we know what the customer wants is it should be tested. So there's been so many times where I thought an ad would work and it doesn't work, and there've been a lot of times where I vice versa didn't think an ad would work and go ahead and test it, and it brings in a ton of sales and a ton of revenue. So that's why it's important to test, and I think performance marketers understand that for sure. They know that there needs to be message testing, format testing, whether image or video, uh, different types of concepts like UGC, user generated content, or 3D motion graphics. Like these are all types of formats that should be tested. I think there's another aspect of marketing, which is brand marketing, where it's a little bit more opinionated and there's a place for that as well. And for brand marketing, the metrics are different. They're different. So it's harder to measure than performance marketing. But I still think with brand messaging that it should be tested. There should be some sort of synergy between brand and performance. For instance, the performance marketing team letting the brand team know that these are the messages that resonate the most, or this type of content, whether it's UGC or some sort of 3D motion graphic or anything like that is resonating the most. So let's incorporate some of those elements into our brand ads because that just lowers the risk of it flopping or it not resonating with the market.
Totally. So, what are the sort of general testing methodologies? Is it like an A/B testing? How do you guys develop these testing methodologies? Because one of the things is like creative is quite subjective, right?
Yes, it's very subjective. And so, yes, A B testing at scale, pretty much. When you're testing your creatives, whether they're video ads or image ads, you need to be very scientific about it. And you start by tagging your ad names, making sure that you're accounting for the hook, what you're saying in your body, what creator is saying this, what is shown in the 3D motion graphic. All of these are important to track and measure. And I mentioned it being scientific, and that's because you only test one thing at a time. If you're testing two different variables at a time, whether it's the hook and the script in the body, you won't know what is driving performance up or down. You don't know whether it was the hook you changed that made performance better or worse, or whether it was the script that changed that made performance better or worse. So yes, A/B testing, and there are so many different things to test, whether it's the first 3 seconds of the video ad or yeah, even the script, because some of the proven scripts in video ads, like a problem, agitate solution, educational, these are all different scripts that have been proven to work. And a lot of A/B testing goes into um, video ads and static ads to some certain extent, but more so video ads.
Got it. So, because like I think with static ads, it becomes relatively more easier, right? Like you could, like kind of just do like a binary testing, like is this good or not, But with video ads, like I don't know, it's more on the probable, I think like yeah, 70% of this video is good. So like generally, like you said, you predominantly did all of this on Facebook. So would you let Pixel kind of pick and do the testing? Like would most of the testing happen there, or would you build a sort of pipeline to do the testing internally, and then put it on Facebook and all the other social media platforms?
Yeah, that's a great question. So generally, when people do creative testing, it's on Facebook or Meta, and there's a conversion event that you typically optimize for. So let's say you're a subscription app and you want to get more trial starts. That's going to be the optimization event that you're going for. So for apps, that's going to be the SDK. For websites, it'll be the pixel or some sort of server to server event tracking. And the whole idea for performance marketing is that you want to create ads that get you the most sales, um, profitable sales, and new customer profitable sales. So that's how you track. And when you start testing, you'll notice, for example, some ads have a lower cost per acquisition or CPA. Those are good. Um, Ads with a high CPA, you want to measure why it's not working. Take a look at what you're saying, in those ads, take a look at what you're saying, what are some of the common elements in the winning ads, and just do more of that, and do less of what isn't working. And I want to add also, with testing, you want to have a representative sample of conversion events in each ad. And on iOS, it's hard because of SK Ad Network. There's a 3-day delay with your conversion data. On web, it's a bit easier. I try to aim for at least 15 to 20 conversion events on an ad before I make the call. So that'll depend on what the cost per acquisition is. If you have a higher price item, you will want to spend more on testing. With a cheaper item like a $5, I don't know, a $50 cost per subscribe, you can test. Yeah, you can test more creatives than if you were running like a $1,000 product.
Right. It's actually so interesting to see that there's so much science behind advertisements. Uh, you know, it's quite interesting. So, you said like performance marketing and then brand awareness marketing, they're kind of different, right? And you've kind of established some of the KPIs that are important for performance marketing, right? Like maybe your call to action might be to get subscriptions on your free trial website, right? But in terms of like brand awareness campaigns and stuff like that, like generally, what are the key KPIs or metrics that they look into for those type of campaigns?
Yeah, so some of the main metrics that brand advertisers look at is something like a brand recall. So Facebook would run your brand ad. They would do brand lift studies, and they would ask the user about a few days or maybe 30 days after running that brand ad whether they remember seeing an ad for your brand. So that's one way that brand advertisers measure. It's that brand recall lift. There's been some posts on LinkedIn by this guy, Preston, who sold Chubbies, but he's been writing a lot of content about bridging the gap um, between brand and measuring. For instance, if you're getting 100 followers on your page, how many of those followers go on to purchase? So that he recommends trying to tie brand to performance. It likely will be a longer term effort than performance marketing. Performance is kind of a short term, medium term play, while brand is a longer term play. And you'll see, as brands get bigger, as the companies get bigger, they spend more and more of their advertising dollars on brand. And that's because they want to, quote unquote, soften the edges of the market, build familiarity with the brand, and then the conversion campaigns on Facebook, for instance, will target them with conversion based ads because they're more familiar. They're exhibiting behaviors that look like existing customers. So, but yeah.
Right. I mean, sometimes it's just crazy. I don't know if it ever happens to you, but I've heard a lot of people talk about it. Like, you'll often have a conversation with a friend, talk about a certain product that you want to get, and then the next day, or in the next couple hours, all of your like Instagram ads are just filled with those products. I mean, as a guy who spends a lot of time, working on growth marketing and stuff like that, how do these apps how are these apps like really tracking like what you really want? Like it's freakishly scary.
I know that's happened to me a few times where I was talking to a friend about, we were at a coffee shop and he was talking about these um, kind of like sunset lamps. And then all of a sudden I go home and then I start seeing those ads. And I used to think that they were listening to us. They might be, to be honest. Who knows? But it's based on like one subset of data that they use is like IP data. Like okay, you're on the same Wi-Fi, um, and so that's a signal. Or your friend looked at these sunset lamps recently. Um, Maybe he talked to you about it. I don't know. There's I don't know too much about how the algorithm works, but I think you being on the same Wi-Fi as them and them looking at that in the past will influence your device because you've been on the same Wi-Fi or are very close to each other. I worked at a programmatic display company, and like location based data is very, very important. So, on the same Wi Fi, or if you're in the same household in the same Wi Fi, um, target you with ads.
I mean, it's scary. Like a performance marketer like you as well that dwells into all of this data is still not sure like how they're able to target such specific ads that you've had real world conversation with. It's insane. Uh, but yeah, okay. So I want to go back into Cash App, right? Cash App's quite interesting company. Jack Dorsey. I think it's named Block right now, right? That's Cash App is a subsidiary of Block. Is that am I correct?
Yeah, you're right. It's a part of
Okay.
Block.
Right. So how is working at Cash App? I know that the time that I used to live in the U.S., like Cash App was getting pretty big. Venmo was I think still the dominant uh, peer-to-peer transfer sort of application, but I think Cash App is probably second to it. How is it working at Cash App? Like, what was the key distinction, between working at Cash App and Calm? Like, how did you like did the same frameworks and methodologies work, or you had to calibrate it, because this is financial services and then the other one's a meditation app?
Yeah, yeah, great questions. So there are a number of things that were different. Um, One, there was no in-house team at Cash App that was creating performance creative. So we had to work with outside agencies to get those. So we worked with UGC agencies. We've worked with 3D motion graphic agencies to create new ads for us for testing. Number two, the way that we measured success was slightly different. And by the time I was at Cash App, SK Ad Network had taken full effect. So iOS campaigns, you're not able to see user level data anymore. You're still able to see user level data for Android, but not iOS. So we primarily looked at channel level performance through a media mix modeling lens. So less so what the ad networks themselves were reporting, whether it was what Snapchat was reporting or what TikTok was reporting or what Facebook was reporting. We were looking at media mix modeling. So we based all our spend allocation on that. So that was also different. And working at Cash App, another thing that was different is Calm is one product. Cash App has multiple products: Bitcoin, stocks, peer to peer. Each of these products have a different USP. Yeah.
So, like as you mentioned, so there's multiple products in Cash App. Uh, I guess some just moving on from Cash App, uh, you after subsequently after Cash App, you started your own company that was Sovereign AI. So, what made you feel like, hey, I should leave my good job and move into something and build something of my own?
hmm Great question. I think it's different for everybody, but for me, I quit because life is short. That's one thing. And number two is um, I felt a need to flex my creative muscles again. So actually, after I left Cash App, I started my own performance marketing agency before Sovran. So I was doing that for about a year. I was working only with health and wellness clients because I love that mission when I was at Calm to make the world a better place. It really got me up in the morning, writing scripts, making ads. Um, so yes, so that's why I left because life is short. Do what you want. I wanted to flex my creative muscles, and when I was working on the agency, I there was good timing because AI generated content was getting much better. Uh, I remember around 2020 when I was still at Com, some semblance of AI generated imagery started to bubble up, and we actually tested some AI generated images in our ads in 2020. They didn't look great, uh, but we figured let's test it, see how it does, and it didn't perform great. It didn't perform terribly. So I was keeping track of AI imagery since 2020, and then I noticed that around 2023, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion started getting really good, and you know, with ads and with video ads, sourcing content is a pain. Knowing like which creator to reach out to make content. I was using Blender to make 3D motion graphics when I was at Comment. That took a lot of time. That took overnight renders and all that. And so I figured using AI to do some of this stuff, even in early 2023, it worked. Like the subset of ads that like the company that those type of ads work for was kind of small. It doesn't work for companies with a product, for instance. So you have to be very careful about what tools you would use for your strategy. Um,
Right.
but yeah,
So
I
I
kind of
guess
went off on a tangent
s-
there. But
no, that's fine. Generally, when you go off tangents, there's always some interesting point that comes up. So,
yeah,
like let's take like for like a health and wellness, right? That was kind of the clientele that you served when you started your agency. If someone's kind of wants to create a health and wellness brand, like what would you recommend? Like going through the user generated content or like 3D rendered content. What have you seen overall? You know performs. And also the other question I have is there a distinction in terms of the market, right? Like the Americas, the South American region, Asia, like have you noticed like differences in region as well?
great question. So the there's no one size fits all approach with starting with like ads for a health and wellness brand. Um, One example is it depends on who your demographic is. So if your demographic is a woman in her 40s, the ads that she resonates with will be different than a guy in his 20s. So the types of ad formats that they like will be different. So it'll depend a lot on who your demographic is. And with UGC, for instance, if you know your demographic are women over 40, you want to feature more women over 40 in your ads. That's one easy way to do it. But I always recommend testing a whole range of creatives. So you want what's called creative diversity because now creative is targeting is probably what you've heard and what you've seen all around the internet. So you want to test UGC, you want to test 3D motion graphic, you want to test animated explainers, you want to test GIFs, you want to test, you know, organically trending stuff that you've seen on TikTok. Yeah, and then in terms of what's different across countries, I found while we were at Com that the pain points resonated still, like the script, the wording in in the ads. We had a localization team that helped us translate our winning English ads into Portuguese, Korean, Japanese, Spanish, and generally the pain points hit. Whether you're struggling with sleep or you're struggling with anxiety, those are pretty, thankfully, pretty universal pain points that we get to work with. The visuals sometimes didn't resonate. So, when we port over or localize an ad, some visuals in the US didn't hit for, let's say, Spain. And that is also true across advertising platforms. So when we have a creative winner on Facebook, we would always resize it into YouTube. And very rarely, I wouldn't say it never happens, but rarely would that same winner scale on YouTube. Just the algorithm is different, like the screen you're looking it on is different. So, um, yeah, that's probably why you want to test native looking content. Like if you're running on TikTok, make it look like a TikTok post. Um, if you're running on YouTube, make it look more like a YouTube video. But then that kind of calls into question, where do you want to allocate your resources on a growth team? Um, the reason a lot of companies focus on Meta is because they have the most scale and they have the most sophisticated ad platform.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I know. It just seems like Meta is just so powerful in terms of like, targeting actually what you want, you know. So, okay. So in Sovereign, you've got this sort of ad video framework on your website. Basically, it starts with the hook, the body, and the CTA, right? So that's the general blueprint, right, of like how to create a successful performance marketing campaign video. So, talk about like when you break down these each modular frameworks, like where should one put more emphasis to get our higher, like conversion?
That's a great question. So the fundamental structure of a performance video ad or a direct response video ad is the hook body CTA. And it's funny because it's everywhere. LinkedIn posts, you need a good hook. Then you have the meat or the body, and then you end with the call to action. It's everywhere. It's a fundamental structure in content. It just reminds me of the movie Up. Uh, have you seen that movie by Pixar? It's like they start with this super sad story and it just hooks you. Um, so yeah, the going on to your second question, the most important thing I I argue to test if you have limited resources is your hook. So the first 2 to 3 seconds of your video ad is the most important to test. And that's because if you look at your Facebook ads manager and you look at the average view duration of your video ads, very rarely does it exceed 6 seconds. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be people that watch it all the way through the end. But on average, most people just watch 5 to 6 seconds of your video ad. And I'm in ad accounts that are spending six figures. At Calm, we were spending 3 to 6 million a month, and this holds true. So when you test a lot of hooks, the first 3 seconds of your ad, you're testing essentially 60 to 75% of your video ad on average. So that's where the meat is. I would test the hook and then maybe the beginning shot of your body video. So in terms of the structure of the video ad, I would focus on the first 5 to 6 seconds. Some performance agencies call this the on ramp. So instead of the hook and the beginning of the body, they call it the on ramp. Um, mhm.
So, I think the hook is pretty important, right? Just looking at, just hyper analyzing my scrolling patterns, it's quite evident, right? Like,
Yeah,
couple seconds, if
yeah,
I'm not baited in, I'm moving to the next one. You just need that constant rush of dopamine. So, I mean, if you're advising some people on how to like better think of their hook, right? 3 to 5 seconds, like, to convey what your brand is about, or to see the rest part of the video is quite a crucial thing to optimize for, right? So, are there any sort of rule of thumbs, or, some sort of strategies you can sort of focus on to kind of make your hook more sharper to catch the bait?
yeah. Excellent question. That's like, if you understand this for your brand, it'll make all the difference. But if you deconstruct the hook, you can deconstruct them into what you see, what and then what you hear. So what you see is, I call it the visual hook. Some people call it a scroll stopper. What you see is the text overlay, and increasingly, the third thing that is important is what you hear, because on Reels and on TikTok, the sound is on. Um, so if you deconstruct those three things, what you see, um, what you hear, and what you read, you want to be testing a lot. With visual hooks, I love oddly satisfying stuff. Um, like, for instance, Noom's ads, they test a lot of dunking a burrito in sauce, or pouring cereal into a bowl of coffee, or pouring cereal into a bunch of green liquid. Like, that sort of stuff is engaging. And you can be pretty liberal about your hook. I think there's kind of a gray area of how weird do you want your visual hook to be. Um, so that'll depend on the advertiser and their preference, because you can have a great hook, but it has nothing to do with your brand. And you can have a high hook rate, but then no one goes on to purchase. So you can have that happen as well. But I think it's important to test. It's more important to have fun in your testing. So again, you never know what will work. For instance, some of Curology's ads, they're a skincare brand. One of their visual hooks is they have a marshmallow and they have a blowtorch, and they're burning the marshmallow with a blowtorch, and it's in reverse. Nothing really to do with skincare, but they use it as a visual hook, and they're a very, very well-known brand, and their performance team likes to take risks, which is important in the feed if you don't want your ads to get ignored. So that's the visual hook. The text hook is also very important. It's like 50-50 with the visual. So you want to start with, something like 3 common misconceptions about menopause, or um, did you know blah blah blah, or you can be there are so many different hooks that you can test to um, get people to keep watching.
Right. I mean, it's super interesting to see. There's just so much science behind it. Sometimes, like, you see all these top brands, like as you mentioned, like Curology and stuff like that. It's crazy that how much science actually goes behind it. And I've noticed, a lot of podcasts that have like these shorts and reels, like they'll have some like GTA video, or some like gaming video at the bottom, and that baits you in. Like,
Mm.
it's just all these clever tactics, to engage the audience, to have longer retention, to convey their point. It's actually so fascinating. There's so much science behind it. So moving to, like, I think the most interesting part of our conversation. So far it's been quite interesting, but I think this is going to be really interesting. Generative AI, right? You did mention about it a little bit. We talked about testing AI generated content. I want to talk about, as a founder, right? In the creative ad agency space, like, how are you thinking of generative AI helping shape the course of your product?
Of my product, Sovran.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh man, A great question. I have a Substack and I've been writing about AI and advertising for over a year now. And very early on, I recognized the power that AI video has for advertising. For instance, you very soon you won't really need a 3D motion graphic designer. Um, there are a few ways where you can fine tune a model, stable diffusion with something like a dream booth, so that you can create products. You can prompt a product with any art style you like. That's something that I've tested last year. But with generative AI and creative strategy and ads, there's there are two main problems that advertisers have to solve. One is getting the content, and then the second is arranging the content in a way where it is a high performing ad. So, so you can think of it like getting the ingredients and then following a recipe. So with generative AI, the first problem will be less and less. You know, you have AI generated UGC people. You have with Sora, you can generate B-roll very, very easily. So the issue of sourcing content will be gone. I think the second problem will be how can I arrange these clips, this content in a way where it's gonna help me get sales. So with Sovran, one quote from Jeff Bezos is always top of mind. He says, "Don't bet on something that changes. Bet on something that won't change in the next 10 years." I'm kind of butchering what he said, but essentially what he's saying is find something that won't change. And so with Sovran, I think what won't change with video ads is that basic structure of hook, body, call to action. So I think in the future, I'm biased, obviously, but having advertisers and letting advertisers and agencies test their content in whatever order or whatever hook they want to test first or text hook they want to test first will be very, very, very powerful.
Totally. I mean, it's crazy. Some of the B-roll video that's coming out of Sora and stuff like that is insane. Uh, I don't know, like just in our conversation, like some of my thought of like I feel like the way ads and stuff are gonna sort of shape up in the future. Are like right now, like ads are still really generalized, right? I think like with Sora and all these models eventually coming in, ads are going to get so hyper individualized, right? Like let's say if it's a general product like urology, right, and you want to target each sort of racial group, like you can really like morph that person into someone that looks like me or looks like you or looks like a white person, and so there's more connect to it. I think like hyper what is it, individualized content is because the cost is just going to be at a fraction of the cost. It's going to be cents. So I don't know. How are you seeing like the future of advertising, like with AI agents? How do you see all of this shaping up?
Mm, I love that question. Early last year, when autonomous agents were starting to pop up, I theorized that there would be a creative strategy agent, there would be a media buying agent, there would be a data analysis agent. Um, I still think we're trending that way. I haven't really looked at the latest um, autonomous agents. I've tried AutoGPT, and I don't know if you remember AutoGPT, but last year, mid last year, it was this tool that you can do anything with it, and that's what was expected. But I think the scope of what was possible for AutoGPT was too large, so it kept hanging up for me, and it kept running into issues. It kept like looping, and I think a lot of people experience that. So I think with autonomous agents, having like giving it some tools and then um, giving it a very narrow scope of things to do is um, it seems like that's where we're headed. So yeah, it'll be interesting because Sam Altman theorized that there will be a one-person billion-dollar company, and you can probably do that.
I think that's inevitable.
Yeah, yeah,
I believe that
with an
I
army of
believe
agents.
Amongst Us, the do you remember the game Amongst Us? Like, I believe that that was like a four-person team, and like I think it's like
Oh
a
yeah,
billion-dollar company or something like that. So we're almost there. Like it's
yeah,
not too far when a 16-year-old kid creates a billion-dollar company sitting in his mom's basement.
yeah,
I don't think we're too far from it. Okay, so my like my last question to you is, if I'm a brand, looking to get into performance marketing, try to test my ad and use Sovereign, you know, tell me like, what benefit am I gonna get? How to reach out to you, and how Sovereign's really gonna help you have a successful performance marketing campaign.
yeah, yeah. Thank you for that question. Um, Sovereign will help you with a few things. So one is the modular framework, so you're able to test your hooks and your body videos and your call to actions in a clean scientific way, because it will also name each video ad for you, so that when you go in and test it on Meta or TikTok or whatever, you know what elements are being presented to your audience. So it also helps with what's called creative velocity or speed. Um, so you want to shorten the window between when you get your learnings and when you test your new batch. So historically, with in-house teams, you have a designer, or you might work with an agency, and you have an Asana board, and then you know you have a task, and it takes a week. Or with an agency, it might not even be in the contract, so you might have to pay more. So Sovereign will help you with testing scientifically, naming them for you, and also speed. You can go in and select 10 hooks, 10 bodies. It'll make 100 variations for you um, within a few minutes. And yeah,
Awesome.
find me
So
on
I'm gonna.
LinkedIn.
Yep.
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. Website is sovran.ai, sovran.ai. Very early on my journey, but it's exciting. I'm talking with very exciting companies and hoping to solve their pain points. And yeah, and if you
Awesome.
follow me on
Yeah, I mean,
LinkedIn, then you can follow my journey.
totally. Highly recommend people checking out Manson's LinkedIn, and I'll also leave Sovereign's link in the bottom. Uh, if you want to get calm growth marketing uh, Cash App growth marketing leader advise you on your performance marketing, I don't think it gets better than this. So thank you so much, Manson. Really appreciate the conversation. Got a lot out of it. Hope the audience got a lot out of it. Uh, Thank you so much.